Hello, I'm Victoria Emerton, and welcome to Behind the Design, brought to you by Design and Mental Health, the leading in-person event connecting professionals from around the world who design, create, manage, and deliver care in the built environment for mental health care. Design and Mental Health takes place in the UK each June and features a comprehensive programme of presentations, panels, and workshops, a free-to-attend exhibition of specialist products and services, and the prestigious Design and Mental Health Awards. The event dates, programme details, and how to book your event passes are all on the event website. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Philip Ross, co-founder of Safehinge Primera, chair of the Design and Mental Health Network, and trustee at the Centre for Mental Health. Philip, thank you very much for your time and welcome to Behind the Design.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation today.
Excellent. So you're presenting at Design and Mental Health in June, and we're going to talk a little bit about that and a bit about you. So you've been working in mental health design for over 15 years. What's the biggest thing you've learned?
I suppose probably one of the biggest points that I've taken from that past 15 years is the reflection that safety as a focus area is not enough just on its own. I think for a long period of time we were perhaps kind of prioritizing safety above all else. And that's, I think, kind of creates some problems in it as well. It can kind of create environments which are stripped of dignity, comfort, and perhaps a therapeutic value, which is actually one of the most fundamental things that we need in mental health caring environments. Um, so I think the kind of big question I suppose I've kind of taken away myself is if we're kind of really truly supporting spaces that support recovery, how do we make sure that we're creating warm, loving, and caring spaces, and not spaces that just are there to contain people at risk.
So at the event, you're going to talk about hyper alert environments in mental health. What do you mean by that, and why is it a concern?
One of the things I've come across recently, both from listening to people with lived experience, active service users, and also staff from the front line, is this realization that there has kind of been a growing sense of fear that's kind of been embodied in some of these spaces. And that kind of is built up by a whole host of different things. Number one, there's the kind of ongoing, let's eliminate all risk. And because you can't eliminate all risk, you kind of set people up in a misaligned kind of almost setting people up for failure. I think there's another challenge, which is because of the ongoing capacity within mental health care. People are arriving in these inpatient settings in a much more acute state, much higher levels of distress and crisis. And that again, it just introduces more challenge and more risk and leading on to kind of more fear in these spaces. I think the other part of it is this kind of challenge to balance out the therapeutic and safety needs. We're ending up in sometimes a space which creates people being on edge as well. You know, it's all this kind of messaging around the built environment is telling you there's something going to go wrong. You know, we're afraid of something going to go wrong. And then layering on top of that, sometimes then what we're starting to see with technology coming in is where it's not just a kind of message of perhaps risk and fear that's coming from the built environment. It's literally an audible message saying something's going wrong, and it's perhaps sometimes happening too frequently. You'll hear people talk about alarm fatigue and how it's kind of creating this on edge scenario. So I think with all of these things, the intention is good, but I think it's just about making sure we get that balance between how do we manage risk, both by risk elimination or good clinical practice to manage the risk, and then at the same time doing that in a way which doesn't in turn provoke more concern, more feeling of what am I worth here, and do I trust the people around me, and all sorts of things. And if we can get that overall ecosystem to work, then I think it actually starts to create the platform for good therapeutic relationships between the people who are living in these spaces and the people who are working in these spaces.
And of course, talking to people is key. Information is key, and hearing about people's experiences in treatment settings. So you've always shared powerful real life stories from people who have lived experience. Why do you do that, and how do you use these stories?
Um, I mean, I started speaking to people with lived experience good 10 years ago, actually. It didn't happen immediately. Um, I mean, I suppose the kind of reality is I came into the world of mental health design when a friend was detained. And that was my very first insight. So the whole journey for me started with listening to a friend's own personal lived experience and actually seeing it firsthand. But yeah, it was about 10 years ago I started this kind of desire to just make sure I was connected to people and really understanding their experience of design decisions that were taken. And what I found is it just moved me. Um, like the simplest of things, you wouldn't really think about them, but they were remarkably significant to them. Again, these are people who are in these spaces 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's their home or it's their workplace. They can be kind of charged places at times because there's a lot of emotions going around in that. Just it's difficult not to be moved by that. And I use their kind of stories to just kind of continue that drive for creating better mental health spaces. They ultimately provide the insights that we need as designers, both at product level, at architectural level, at system level, that gives us the kind of focus of taking out what we intended and then understanding what the reality is. And I always come back to it. It's when you see things that are not quite right. I think it's relatively easy to point out bad design. Whether you're a designer or not, you can kind of point to things of like this doesn't work because it feels like this, or this is the challenge I've got. So I always acknowledge nobody intends to design something badly, but within mental health, there's just so many conflicting requirements that sometimes you can unintentionally lose sight of what's the most important. And we design for one thing as a priority over something else, and it doesn't quite work in the end. And I suppose that's a kind of key I take from this is by listening to that lived experience voice, listening to the voice of clinicians on the front line, you start to kind of learn and understand everything cannot be equally important. You have to kind of sequence things in the priorities to help you make good decisions. And their view is the most important and biggest priority because that's the kind of biggest experience that is happening in a day to day.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned co-production as a core part of your design approach. Why is that so critical in mental health spaces? Please sort of elaborate so that everyone understands.
I think it's crucial in mental health for a few different reasons. As I said, just that kind of previous point, the people who use these spaces, service users and staff members, they know what they need better than anybody else. And I would stress that co-production is, I've heard this term, co-production is not the abdication of design responsibility. And it's really, really important. The co-production piece is about really understanding from these individuals what's really important and getting a really good quality brief. I then think the responsibility then sits with us as designers to kind of, right, okay, I've got the design skill. Now that I've really understood the problem and I understand the prioritization of different things, I can actually translate that into designs. And the co-production process is continually going back to these individuals and just checking in along the way, saying, look, I know we said this, and this were important. These are a few options we've created. Can we just test which of these you think will best meet these kind of predefined briefs that we've kind of created? And you do that, and sometimes it'll actually come through and saying, actually, do you know what we said was the most important and the second most important? They might actually be the other way around now that you've actually presented me with these different considerations. Um, but I think other reasons why co-production is so important is actually about ensuring people who are in again using these spaces know that they were part of the design process. It gives them kind of confidence it's been designed with them, not just for them. That's a kind of really powerful way to take a first step towards addressing some of the power imbalances that just naturally come into play in spaces like this. And so I think all of this comes together into creating a kind of better designed space, something that's more soothing, more calming, and it's really in around this kind of like this ecosystem. And there's evidence out there. So Roger Ulrich studies basically say that if you design well-designed environments, people's behaviors will be better. So I talked earlier on about this kind of hyper alert stage and people coming in more acutely unwell. It's placing even more need for good quality, well-designed environments because again, the evidence tells us it will actually create better behaviours from everybody, not just patients, but from our service users, but from staff as well. And so we need this kind of improved ecosystem. I think the only way to do that is through good quality co-production and creating best in class environments.
It sounds hugely effective and really important. And one would like to think that those that come after into those spaces are also aware that co-production was used in the environment that they're now occupying, so they feel that value moving forward. So you have a massive amount of experience. Without giving too much away, what's the one major change that we need to make in designing for mental health care?
I think probably we went through a chapter in mental health where we had perhaps almost too much of a focus on just risk alone. And I think it's now kind of gravitating towards human-centered design. And that human-centered design obviously considers risk because we need to keep people safe, but it also considers the therapeutic aspects and how do we create these spaces that not just platforms, the kind of human to human connection, but really kind of enables it, empowers it, actually excites it as well. Because that human to human piece is the only way that somebody will be able to kind of get through a mental health crisis. It's the only way they'll be able to get to that place of stabilization or recovery. And so kind of moving beyond just thinking about risk, we're kind of thinking about environments that restore dignity, trust, and autonomy as a way of actually managing risk as well. You know, one of the, I suppose, my kind of key next kind of I see as the next agenda for mental health is actually introducing technology. There's a huge contrast between mental health care and the physical health care kind of as a way of operating. One uses technology day in, day out, all over the place. And then by contrast, mental health is still quite far behind. But we've seen examples recently where technology can be deployed badly. Technology that actually perhaps undermines confidence and trust between the patient and the staff member. So I think it's about kind of introducing the right technology in the right way that always platforms and fosters that human connection. And that's how ultimately people will be reassured that they're feeling safe.
Amazing. So that sets you up quite nicely for your session at Design Mental Health in June. So Philip's going to be presenting a presentation titled "Whose Anxiety Are We Treating? Balancing Risk Mitigation with the Need for Caring and Therapeutic Environments." So I highly recommend that anyone who's enjoyed listening to this conversation comes along in June. So Design Mental Health will be taking place on the 3rd and 4th of June in Manchester. Safehinge Primera are exhibiting at the event as well on stand 300. So while Philip's presenting, I'm sure you're coming with plenty of colleagues who can talk to anybody about what you guys do while they're at the event.
Yeah, we'll have the full team on hand. We'll have our exhibition stand so we can show and talk about the kind of latest innovations that we've got available. So yeah, please do come along and reach out and come along and see the session as well. Hopefully it'll be thought-provoking and also a bit of inspiration for how we can kind of navigate the challenges of design together.
Well, that's the beauty of in-person events, isn't it? Those conversations that you have and ideas exchange and seeing, what we can come up with together. So if you'd like to book your conference pass at Design and Mental Health, you can do so at designandmentalhealth.com. Thank you very much for your time today, Philip. We look forward to seeing you, your colleagues, and everybody watching Behind the Design at Design and Mental Health in Manchester on the 3rd and 4th of June. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Victoria.